All right, with that, I'm going to call up Josh, who's going to take us deeper into talking about identity. And Colby, if you can do Josh and I a favor, I forgot to ask earlier. Can you bring the table from the far side? That would be great. But this is such an interesting morning, and I'm excited for what you're going to bring, Josh, in terms of the Father's heart. And so let's I just want to pray for Josh as he comes to speak and share with us. Just lift up your hands, more in emotion to God, we just want to receive what it is that you want to speak to our hearts today. And Father, I just thank you for Josh. Lord, I thank you, Lord, for how you have just gifted him to carry your heart. And so, Father, we just pray this morning that the words that you have placed in his heart, God, that he would be able to just bring those out in such a way that the seeds just go deeper into our hearts of what you want to do, what you want to show us about ourselves, what you want to show us about each other, and what you want to show us about you, Father God. And so just bless his words. And Lord, help us to just be open to your movements in us, God. May we turn to you and not away from you as we hear more about what it is to allow you to heal our identities. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Wow. It's already been such a full morning. Oh. Okay, we are continuing in the attitude of prayer this morning that my computer does not decide to run Windows updates again. How's everybody this morning? Not bad. Yeah, Colby says not bad. I mean, it is such a full morning. Oh, it's like the Lord, I feel like we've been here for, not that I'm saying that time has slowed down, but it seems like so much has even just transpired in the last hour. And I think sometimes there is like almost a suspension of, I think the Lord can probably slow down time. Let's put it that way. You've ever felt like time slowed down? I think the Lord could do that. Maybe he has this morning, I don't know. I do know, I was talking with a friend this week who was just telling me how much he appreciated what I was sharing last week, and he said as far as he was concerned, I could have just gone on for hours. So, that friend actually happens to be an elder at the church here, so, that's spiritual authority there. Last week, I think the main point of my message last week was love Justin Trudeau. If you remember, we were talking a little bit about that and seeing each other as children of God. And, it's astounding to me how quickly the world moves today. Because from last week to this week, I mean, just so much has shifted. And I loved, Tracy, that you took time, just a moment to pray for Ukraine. And even to pray for the people of Russia, because it's not exactly like there's a lot of people in Russia. There's a lot of people protesting in Russia right now, saying that we ought not to do this. And, I understand that the whole situation is a complicated situation, but real people are suffering. And what I want to do, just starting off, and I think hopefully this will lead into what I want to talk about this morning, is, do you know, Ukraine is one of, if not the center of Eastern Orthodox Christianity. It's one of the main hubs of Eastern. I mean, I was talking with a friend this week, and he was telling me that Kiev, I think that's how you say that, is essentially like a holy city in Eastern Orthodox Christianity. And it's interesting how centers for spirituality, if you will, sometimes become places of great chaos and turmoil. I mean, just think of Jerusalem, right? Over thousands and thousands of years. So what aspect of what's happening right now is something shifting in the heavenlies? I don't think that you can have such a worldwide scale event happen and not have something spiritual at the same time. We've talked about in recent weeks and months, we've talked about this body, soul, spirit divide that we live in this Western dichotomy. But the reality is all of creation is woven together as a tapestry. And so when something happens in the quote-unquote natural, you can be sure that God is aware and doing something in the midst of it. There's this, I just want to offer this up. Just enter into prayer with me for our Ukrainian brothers and sisters. And I'm going to read this prayer from Saint Dmitry of Rostov. He was a Ukrainian Eastern Orthodox saint a couple centuries ago. And he said that, so I want to read this over the situation in Ukraine and Russia, and the situation over Ukraine in particular, and the suffering of the people there. Saint Dmitry prayed this: "Come, my light, illumine my darkness. Come, my life, and revive me from death. Come, my physician, and heal my wounds. Come, flame of divine love, and burn up the thorns of my sins, kindling my heart with the flame of your love. Come, my King, sit upon the throne of my heart and reign there. For thou alone art my King and my Lord." And so, Father, we offer this prayer up to you on behalf of our brothers and sisters that are suffering, on behalf of the church in Ukraine, on behalf of those that have lost family, on behalf of those that have lost their homes. Come, be light, be life, be resurrection, be king in the midst of all the chaos and the turmoil, and be peace. A few months ago, if you guys remember, I spoke about pulling apart Romans 7 and 8. How many of you remember that and took copious notes on that? I remember it, okay? I have the notes to prove it. And this is probably what you'll remember. What's that, Colby? You're making fun of me? This is what you'll probably remember. I showed a video. And the video was of an elderly woman sitting in a chair in a nursing home, and she had dementia. Or Alzheimer's. It was, I can't exactly remember the condition. And they had put headphones and were playing the music of the ballet that she danced in her whole life. Swan Lake, yes, thank you. Yes, Swan Lake. And she began going through the motions with her arms, and you guys remember that, right? You remember the woman dancing and not me, okay. But the whole point was that the practices that we employ in life become habits. And what we habitually do, you are the product, as I said last week, you're the product of this motley assortment of memories and experiences, and your identity is this composite of what's happened to you, and God doesn't divorce your identity from your history, but He works within your history to form Himself within you, and these habitual patterns that we employ, we get an end result with those things. And so it's important that we implement practices in our life that connect us with the heart of Jesus. Practices like silence and solitude and fasting and prayer and worship and simplicity, all these things. But sometimes, have you ever been stuck? Raise your hand if you've ever felt stuck in your life. Sometimes practice isn't enough. The discipline isn't enough. The habitual pattern isn't enough. And I'll probably say something controversial right now, just to prepare you for it. it's interesting. One encounter with the Lord can change everything, okay? But one encounter with the Lord is not enough, okay? Prayer can change everything, but prayer is not enough. The Father made you a relational creature. He designed your physiology to need people around you. Okay, He didn't design you to be able to grow and develop in an isolated environment. He designed you, and I've said this many times, I need you and you need me to become all that we're created to become. I can't just sit in my living room and have encounter after encounter after encounter with the Lord and deal and grow into the mature person that God's called me to be. I can't. So much of who I become is contingent upon who you become. And so much of who you become is contingent upon who I become. So we can implement the practices. We can spend the time in silence and solitude, and you absolutely should. We can spend our time reading the Bible. We can spend our time in worship and in praise and practicing disciplines like simplicity. But it's never going to be enough, because I need you to see me, and you need me to see you. Not just because God said that we need each other, but because He literally designed your body physiologically to respond to the people around you. There's the psychologist that was responsible for codifying the diagnosis for PTSD, Bessel van der Kolk. He did this. He worked with war veterans and began to see, as he worked with war veterans that had come out of Vietnam, and then he was working with just your average everyday person. He was noticing patterns that the war veterans that had dealt with PTSD and the symptoms they were displaying, the woman who had been abused by her husband, or the adult who had experienced neglect in childhood, they actually had some of the similar patterns that the veterans that had come back from Vietnam were experiencing. And so he started to see that PTSD is not just a war symptom, it's a symptom that we all struggle with because we've all, to some degree or another, been traumatized. And one of the things Bessel van der Kolk said is that he said, because of the way your brain is wired, that you almost don't exist without being able to see other people and be seen by other people. Because so much, think about it. I think I've said this before. Try and describe yourself without using terminology that relates to how you interact with other people. It's next to impossible. If I try and describe my foibles or my insecurities, it's generally related to how other people see me. If I describe my virtuous traits, the long list of them. Yeah. Thank you, Steve. Yeah. They all are surrounded by how I interact with other people. If I consider myself a peaceful person, I'm peaceful because of how I hold myself within circumstances driven by the people around me. So all the ways I think of myself are filtered through this perspective that says, I can't think of myself apart from who I am in the midst of my community and my people. And your brain is literally wired to respond to those things. God created you specifically. So God created your body, right? Like it or not, He did. And He had a say in the physiological makeup of your body. It's interesting, He gives us certain practices when we look at the way of Jesus and the fact that Jesus spent time in prayer and in silence and in solitude and all these things. We see these practices in the life of Jesus. And he says, I'm the way, meaning that we look at his life, and it's not just that by the way he means go pray for the sick and heal them. That's one aspect of it. But go into the wilderness and be with my Father. That's part of the way. That these practices actually help to quell the nervous system, to bring you to a place of peace, to be able to receive from the Father. They actually help you to retrain how your body responds to certain stimuli. Your brain essentially has two motivating characteristics when you boil it down. The motivating characteristics of your brain will either thrive on joy or on fear. Those are the two sources of energy and motivation for your brain to function and to give you energy and to sustain you. Fear, of course, creates the initial hit that gives you... Fear in its initial phase actually has more energy than joy does. But fear is not sustainable. Joy is. And interestingly enough, as you're developing as a young child, one of the first phases of the brain to begin developing is what some people have termed the joy center, which is in the prefrontal cortex. And a child, for the joy center of your brain to develop, requires that you become the cherished person to someone as a baby. Generally, we would look at the mother doting in affection on her baby as these ripe times for developing the joy center of your brain. But guess what? Not all of us had that. Some of us did, and that's wonderful. But some of us didn't. For you to find a place of sustenance that gives you drive in your life, if the joy center of your brain is underdeveloped because of how you were treated as an infant, that actually has vast ramifications for you as an adult. Now, because we live in this dualistic Western society that separates emotions from the mind, from the body, and we don't necessarily think of ourselves holistically, I don't think of the joy I'm practically experienced as fundamentally intrinsically linked to my brain, fundamentally intrinsically linked to my physiology. And I'll demonstrate to you real quick in our modern culture how we've totally separated those things. Because what happens in the psychological world is that someone gets diagnosed with, say, anxiety or depression, and the fundamental fix for it is a drug that administers an effect that causes the anxiety or depression to diminish, right? But there's no connection in that world to the lived history and why your brain developed in the way that it did to bring you to the place where your brain thrives on anxiety instead, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't have medication. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is all these things are intrinsically linked, that you can't just administer a drug to deal with anxiety and say, well, we've done it now, when the anxiety has grown because of how you were treated throughout your life and how your brain developed throughout your life. You understand what I'm saying? Okay? But because we've separated all those things out, we don't look at my emotional makeup and the history of who I am, the way my body has developed and how my brain is. We just go, well, give me a drug. As opposed to, let me encounter Jesus in the core of who I am and then live that out amongst the people and see people who have overcome great difficulty and begin to live my life in a way that's different than the way I used to live my life. And so again, I'm not saying, don't hear me, I'm not saying antidepressant and anti-anxiety medication is wrong or bad. It's just not the only solution. And it's not the effective solution that is supposed to last for the rest of your life. But we live in this dichotomy in the West, which just says we don't understand or appreciate the holistic being that you are and that God created you to be. So I ended last week and talked briefly about the stages of maturation, the stages of development that you go through. You guys remember that? I just touched on it at the end, right? You remember that from last week, but the Romans 8:7 thing, that was a whole message and you don't remember it. Steve, you look into that one for me too. Okay. So I'm gonna break these down just a little bit and see where we get with this. The first stage of development, as again diving into this from where we left off last week, the first stage of development is the infant stage. The infant stage of development is from the ages 0 to 3, generally, and there's some overlap to this. I'm pulling a lot of this information. There's a number of different resources, but one of the ones that I really appreciate how codified it is the book Living from the Heart Jesus Gave You by Jim Wilder. There's about 8 authors actually in the book. It's a great book if you want to dive further into how we develop into mature, godly people. And so a lot of the resources I'm going to be sharing, or the information I'm going to share, will be culled from that book, although there's it's not just them that talk about this. So the infant stage is 0 to 3. How does an infant communicate what it needs? By crying, right? An infant can't actually express what it needs in specific circumstances, specific terms. Now, when the infant cries, I have a 3-year-old. When our 3-year-old cries, I have to investigate why he's upset. Right? So an infant cries to tell you that it has a need, but I have to figure out how to meet that need. This is a developmental stage. He's learning to express his need, and he's learning to receive the love and the joy and the affirmation of his father and his mother and his community and his brother and sister, and learning to return back to that place of joy where he can be you guys saw, maybe some of you that are up here saw him running back and forth. He was so happy. Actually, this is just a complete side note. He has this, my wife has a photo album. There's about 150 pictures in it, I think. And our 3-year-old, his thing is just collapsing into a ball when he's upset. And so it's 150 pictures of him collapsing into a ball everywhere. It's hilarious. But I've got to then go, okay, what's wrong? What happened? Why are you feeling this way? He was on our exercise machine this morning, and I said, oh, don't play with it like that. And then he collapsed into a ball because I said, don't play with it like that. So I've now got to investigate how to help him return back to joy. That's my responsibility as a parent. So an infant needs a loving family. They need to be loved. They need to be cherished for their uniqueness and who they are. When they don't get what they want, they're prone to emotional outbursts because they don't have what they want. So they try and communicate to the people around them what I want based on the emotional outburst in their life. I can't actually tell you what I need, but I can get really angry when I don't have it. Some of us are stuck in this phase of development. An infant, put it this way, an infant uses negative emotions to control the outcome. Okay? That's an easier way of saying that. I'm going to get into this a little bit. I wish we had a lot more time. I'll say that in a second. The next stage is a child, ages 4 to 12. The child's learning to express their needs and their emotions through basic language. Okay, now I can go to my 6-year-old or my 8-year-old and say, what's wrong? And it may be as simple as being able to say, I'm angry, or I'm disappointed because this happened. Our daughter was playing soccer last year, and her team lost the first few games. And she was really upset about they lost. And she was the goalie, and she was one of the reasons why they lost. And so I had to talk with her, but she can communicate that to me, right? Whereas the 3-year-old can't communicate that to me. And so I have to I have to allow her to express herself and discover her uniqueness and learn language to communicate who she is, and then come alongside her and nurture her in that and try and help her understand, well, what can she do to develop with the soccer thing? Well, Dad will go outside with you and we'll put out 2 little goalposts. I'll kick the ball to you and you try and stop it. And we'll talk about better ways of doing that. Okay, offering different ways to help and to help her nurture the thing that she loves to do, all that, right? So there's a different way. That's a stage of development. She needs something different than the infant needs from 0 to 3, and she communicates what that is in a different way. But you don't expect an 8-year-old or 4 to 12 to take care of the needs of others, right? They're learning to express themselves, but they can't take care of their own needs. They still need certain things from you. They need to be challenged. In the child stage, people need the opportunity to be challenged. The opportunity to see that they can believe in themselves and they can accomplish difficult tasks. They need to develop unique interests and have room to develop unique interests. Again, my daughter loves to sing, and so she can go around singing all the time, so we thought, well, let's get her a singing instructor. I want to give her a unique opportunity to grow and develop and to challenge who she is, and she loves doing it. And there's things that are, you guys remember the talent show, right? When she sang in front of everybody. That was a huge challenge for her. She was actually about an hour before she was ready to quit. I held her in my arms as she cried because she didn't want to do it. She was so nervous. You can do this. Dad's with you. And to make that story a long story short with that one, when she was standing over there waiting to go up, Jesus spoke to her and said, you can do this. And she marched right up here without me, and I was like running after her, like I thought you needed me here. And then she just knocked it out of the park and sang in front of everybody. But a child needs those opportunities to be challenged. So in the child development, ages 4 to 12, a child's learning to do things they don't want to do. People that get stuck in this stage of development tend to procrastinate. I don't want to do the difficult thing. I mean, oftentimes we don't want to do the difficult thing, but it can be a pattern or habit that's being stuck at a maturity level. The adult stage is ages 13 to the first child being born. This person's learning to work with others. They've been witnessed and celebrated by others around them. The child is learning to protect themselves. The adult phase is learning to protect others. To start to reach out and see needs in other people. And where the child can only deal with itself from 4 to 12, the 13-year-old up to the birth of the first child, essentially as a maturation, is I actually see that there's other people that have needs, not just mine. But again, we can get stuck in that place. What we need when we're growing through that is affirmation that we can make it through difficult times, not just what happens to a lot of us as a parent or a teacher or someone saying, well, just suck it up, it's okay. No, we need people inputting into our lives saying, you can do this, I believe in you. We need people around us pouring into us in that stage. The person reaching adulthood needs opportunities to enrich their community, to realize that they can make a difference in the lives of other people. They need to be held accountable for their actions while being affirmed in their uniqueness. Not just being told where they're wrong all the time, but helping them see where they could have done better. The next stage is parenting stage, would be generally the birth of your first child to your youngest child becoming an adult. This person begins to become comfortable receiving guidance from wiser people. I'm starting to recognize I need guidance from other people. You know, the classic, right? The teenager that growing into adulthood is, I can do it all on my own, don't worry. Right? I knew everything when I was 18. I've only gotten dumber since. I didn't need anybody's help, but I failed miserably all the time. Now, in the parenting stage, I need guidance. We presented with a difficult circumstance with our kids. I don't know how to do this in and of myself. I need other people weighing in on me, and I seek that guidance. I'm open to that. As a parent, in that parent stage, we need deep relational community to come alongside us and to help alleviate the tasks, to be supported. The parent stage of maturity needs opportunities to sacrificially give. Look, you don't need to have a child to be in the parent stage of maturity. Okay, I know it's a misnomer. We're defining it as essential age ranges. But to grow in that place where I learn to give sacrificially of myself and that I don't need to be the center of attention. I need those opportunities to begin to mature through those stages. I need support. This is like the growing into adult stage is like Jesus sending his disciples out by twos and saying, don't take anything, giving them specific instructions about all the things they need to do. And they come back going, my goodness, you should have seen this. All the demons, they couldn't even stand in front of us. It was amazing. And he gives them support and he gives them correction. That's cool, guys, but don't rejoice over that. Rejoice that your name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. He gives them instruction and correction. He comes alongside them. He holds them accountable but admonishes their uniqueness, right? The parent stage is when Jesus says, my peace I leave with you. And then he says, now go into the world and do all that I've shown you to do, the Great Commission. There's a distinction between where the disciples were at when Jesus these are grown men, right? There's a distinction, though, between where they're at when he speaks with them and sends them out by twos and where they're at when he says, I'm going now, guys, but the Spirit's going to be with you. There's a distinct level of maturation that happens between those two phases. The oldest stage, the highest stage of maturity, and again, you can break these down even further, is the elder stage. That's when your youngest child is an adult. The elder is, I give my life to my community, my people, those that are around me. I notice those that are not experiencing the family togetherness that we need. I notice the people in my community that are disintegrated and separate and bring them close. I can think of specific people in this community that do that. You know, Jerry and Debbie, and Jack and Shirley. I can think of specific people. I'm not edging anybody out. I'm just off the cuff. There's people in this community that recognize the needs of others and reach out to them and draw them in. They're in the elder stage of spiritual maturity. We need those people. Desperately we need those people. We need more of those people. Desperately need those people. But they also need the opportunity to be able to be themselves and recognized for all that they're doing to sow into the life of others that are around them. Giving sacrificially. For them to be able to grow and mature and develop in who they are. See, that's what I mean, is to get through every one of these stages of maturity. I need you, you need me. We all need Jesus, that's obvious. But we can't grow together if we don't live together. If we don't commune together, beyond just, well, we got together on Sunday and had a nice full worship service, but we need to do life together. Because some of you could be 60 plus and stuck in certain aspects in infant maturity. Some of you are 20 and have moved through those things super quick. Not everybody is given the same lot in life as it pertains to your family of origin, who you are, the people that have poured into you, all those things. We're so unique in that sense. But we can all help each other grow. So Just a couple more minutes. Bear with me. You're tracking with me, I hope. What keeps us from moving through the stages? Because you get, like I've said a number of times, you can get stuck at every stage because there's certain things you need, and not every one of us got those things that we need at those stages to develop. Not every one of us from the ages of 4 to 12 were challenged to grow and given difficult situations and then encouraged to confront those and then given instruction when we didn't. Some of us, our parents were incredibly neglectful, and so we didn't get that kind of input. Some of us didn't have a spiritual community at that point to come alongside us, or we didn't have an extended family to do that. And so we never found that challenge to be able to do that. And some of the wounds of that linger into adulthood. So every one of us, to some degree, the statistics on how many people struggle with trauma are astronomical. If I was to ask you to raise your hands on who had either suffered sexual abuse or physical abuse in their life here, and everybody here could be honest about that because that's a difficult thing to admit, that at least a third of you would raise your hands, statistically. And then if we broadened the scope of that, because there's essentially trauma breaks down into two different categories, trauma of intent and trauma of neglect. The trauma of intent is that someone inflicted harm upon you. Someone did something to you that was incredibly hurtful. Generally, trauma of intent breeds fear in the person. Fear of repeated patterns, fear that that's going to happen again, all that kind of stuff. And then the more it's repeated, the deeper that goes. Not everybody has experienced that kind of trauma, but there's also the trauma of neglect, where you didn't have the necessary input into your life. Both of those types of trauma can get you stuck in the maturation phase, which is why we require healing. The trauma of neglect sometimes can make it difficult to forge deep relationships because we were never seen and heard. I don't know how to express myself because I didn't have people expressing themselves to me. I was neglected. And I'd hazard a guess that every single one of us, to a certain degree, have areas in our life where there's been neglect. So if we were to broaden that scope and say, okay, well, how many of you experienced neglect in your life? It'd probably be almost every one of you that raised their hand. So we get stuck because we haven't either our capacity to return to joy because someone never celebrated us was never developed from an infant stage, or someone harmed us through physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse. And so we didn't have a trusting environment where we could grow. The very person that was supposed to celebrate me and challenge me and help me grow is the one that inflicted the abuse upon me, compounding the matter. I want every person in this building to get to elder maturity, but I also recognize that every person has a unique story that makes it difficult to get there. There's no promise that everybody here is going to get there. Okay, but if we commit one to another, to love one another and to be Jesus to one another, we can get there collectively, together, but we can't do it separately. So trauma is pervasive. Because trauma is not just the individual effect, the individual memory or the breaking of your identity that happened in that traumatic episode or in the neglect that you received. Trauma is all the ways that now my body responds because I learned to thrive on fear as opposed to joy. And so the physiology of who I am needs to be rewired. Maybe Heather, could you come up? We'll wrap this up. Because I've got about a billion other things to share. What do we need to get unstuck? We need a safe environment so that I can build trust with others and I can divulge myself to others. That's what our community is about. We need a safe environment to love one another. I need a spiritual community and a family to nurture my questions about God, about life, about the universe, about everything. If I don't have that, I'm going to be stuck in trying to process these things. So I need wise advice. I need wise people to pour into me. I need people that help me return to joy. People that when I see them, their face lights up because they appreciate who I am and they love who I am. I love walking through the doors of this church every Sunday that someone says, "Hey, great to see you. Welcome in." You realize that actually, like, no joke, that has the capacity to begin the healing process because someone, their face lit up when they saw you. Oh, I'm appreciated. You know, that's not going to do everything, but that's going to do something. And I need people that are my people. People that I see and go, this is who we are. The examples in my community. The par exemplar. The person I would look at and go, oh, when I grow up, I want to be like that. I need those people. We need those people. You need those people. So this is what I want to do this morning as we wrap up. Let's just everybody stand. Let's just stand up. Just going to turn our hearts to the Lord. And I want to create, maybe you'd never considered that the fact that you didn't have the kind of input that you needed was a type of trauma. Maybe you never even thought about that. That you weren't seen and heard and validated as a child. I love the first interaction that we see with Jesus and his Father is, "This is my beloved child." And I can guarantee that every single person in here needs to hear that. Even if you heard it 1,000,000 times from your father, or from your mother, or from people around you, you still need to hear it today. But I'm pretty well convinced that probably 75% of the people in here failed to hear that. Not because your parents were evil or awful or bad or said they had mistakes. But I believe the Father wants to speak to you those very words. Where there's been neglect, that the Father would come along and he would affirm you and he would speak to you. He would show his love to you. That he'd begin to undo the neglect of years. So we're just going to move into a time of worship, turning our hearts to the Father and expecting him to speak. Just offer yourself to him. Father, I've been stuck. I don't know how to convey my needs. I use emotional outbursts to try and communicate who I am. Or I'm afraid and I'm stuck in this cycle. Challenges arise and I just shrink. How do you see me in the midst of that, Father? I can't move past this selfish behavior. I can't think of others. I keep thinking about myself. I never had someone to show me what it looked like to live on behalf of others. Father, would you show me? I believe it wants to meet you in every one of those places. To bring healing, to bring tenderness, to bring his touch. So turn your heart to him. If the ministry teams could come up, that would be wonderful. Anybody that's on a ministry team, if you want prayer, we're going to have people available here to pray with you. But let's just spend some time in the presence of the Lord, letting Him meet us in these spaces where we didn't get the thing that we needed to grow into the people that we're created to be. God knows what you need. And again, if you're having trouble engaging with that, just come forward. Someone's going to pray for you. They'll lay hands on you. They'll bless you. Because you are never enough. But maybe the space right now is the Lord encountering you where you're seated or standing. Maybe it's coming up here and receiving. Both are important. So let's just respond for a few moments. If you need to go, you're dismissed. But we're just going to stay in this moment and have prayer available. Enjoy the rest of your day. Turn your heart to the Father and be with the Father. He longs to encounter you. So let's worship and let's be with Him.